Celebrate Black History Month, Jewish style. Welcome to the Book of Life, a show about Jewish books, music, film, and web. I'm Heidi Estrin. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library, a congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida. Additional support comes from the Association of Jewish Libraries. In most countries, Jews are in the minority. Sometimes this creates an empathy with other minorities, as it did during the American Civil Rights era, when Jews and African Americans often worked side by side for social justice. In some places, such as Uganda, Jews are a minority within the black majority. In this podcast, we'll hear about both of these very moral minorities. An unusual book won the Sidney Taylor Book Award for Jewish children's literature this year. As Good as Anybody, Martin Luther King Jr. and Abraham Joshua Heschel's Amazing March Toward Freedom by Richard Michelson and illustrated by Raoul Colon was the gold medalist in the younger readers category. This beautiful picture book shows the parallel forces that shaped both men into people who felt called to work for change. In this interview, we'll hear from two old friends, Richard Michelson, the author of As Good as Anybody, who was our guest in May 2007, speaking about his picture book Across the Alley, and Arlen Imberman, the handwriting expert who joined us to analyze the authors featured in our September 2008 show. Arlen was eager to strut her stuff again, so we asked her to look at the handwriting of King and Heschel, as well as that of author Rich Michelson.
Richard, how did you come to write a book about the relationship between Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.?
Certainly, Rabbi Heschel was an icon of my own growing up during the 60s, a little later when he came to prominence against the Vietnam War. He was always, to me, a religious figure who had a lot of social relevance. And, his friendship with Martin Luther King was something I was aware of, and I felt it was important to make more people aware of it.
As you researched these two men, what did you learn about them and the parallels between their experiences that you hadn't known before?
I was certainly taken with how both of them came from very strong families. Martin Luther King's father, of course, was a minister. Rabbi Heschel's father was a rabbi. Both these men had very important influence on their sons, but both chose to take their father's livelihood and bring it to a further level. Martin wasn't satisfied, as I mentioned in the book, with his father's preaching that, in the next world, people of all colors and races will learn to live together in peace. He was a little bit more impatient. He wanted to see some change happening in this world. And similarly, Rabbi Heschel was very early on considered a genius, even as a young boy. People assumed he would become a rabbi. But rather than becoming so taken with himself, he really, again, wanted to reach out to people and help people. So I was very much struck with the parallels in their two lives. And, of course, that became the genesis for the book.
Arlen, as a graphologist, give us a snapshot of each of these famous men as revealed through their handwriting.
I will do Heschel first. It was a bit difficult because the writing was in Hebrew. He's a very original thinker. He is a great believer in structures and continuity. And although he wasn't an iconoclast, he does things in a very original way, and all in the name of fulfilling truth, what he believes to be truth. He's a man of compassion, and he was a man who was concerned with the human condition.
Okay, tell us about King.
Unfortunately, I had just a salutation and a signature. So my first surprise was that it looked so conventional. I had expected it to be as unusual as the man himself. He still maintained a certain conventional letter form, which this means that he was brought up to be a good boy who would try to do the right thing. Letters are very connected, which shows his incredible focus. And the connectedness also confirms that he tried to use reason over emotion in confronting challenges. In that respect, he reminds me of Barack Obama in that he was determined that he would never let his opponents determine the rules of his own behavior. The lower zone in all letters represents the unconscious. His lower zone is very embellished and yet angular in the G in King. This angularity is his resistance and his difficulty with authority. The most interesting aspect of the signature is not his name, but the formation of the word junior. The size of the word junior indicates how important it was for him to differentiate himself from his father. So, like Heschel, he was a man who was involved in a tremendously large, painful, and extraordinary inner journey.
Richard, the theme of Black-Jewish relations is not a new one for you. What actually led to your passion for this topic?
Racial issues have been important in a number of my books. My book, Across the Alley, is about a little Jewish boy and a little black boy who live across the alley from each other, but they're not allowed to play with each other during the day, and then they become secret best friends at night. My book, Happy Feet, is about the Savoy Ballroom, which is the first integrated ballroom, and it really goes back to my childhood. I grew up in a neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York, which, when I was born, was probably 90+% Jewish. And 12 years later, it was almost 95% black and later became Hispanic. So it's something that I've always been very aware of. You know, I grew up certainly very confused about race. I grew up in a time when Jews and blacks were really considered the best of friends. You know, Jews were very, very prominent in the civil rights movement. So in my mind, there was always a common goal between Jews and blacks, you know, two oppressed groups that were often taken on by the establishment, as it were. Later on, they were often considered enemies. And, you know, I was trying to figure out why. Certainly, I think that many blacks, as they developed power, started to feel patronized, in a sense, by Jews and their upward mobility. And Jews, I think, felt that they weren't properly appreciated for all that they contributed. So a rift kind of developed. So I think the joint history of these two groups is something that should be emphasized.
Richard, how do you think the presence of Barack Obama in the White House will affect Black-Jewish relations in America?
Well, you know, I'm hoping that the presence of Barack Obama will again bring some attention to the shared positive history. I know Obama has been very affected by the Selma to Montgomery March, and he's certainly aware of the fact that Jews were so important in that whole situation. So we're hopeful.
Arlen, when you look at Barack Obama's handwriting, can you tell us if he will be good for the Jews, as the saying goes?
I'm not quite sure how we can define whether he's going to be good for the Jews. I think he's a man like Heschel who really is his own person. He will do what he truly believes is best for the task at hand.
Richard, it must be a challenge to stay true to these historical figures when you use them as characters in your own book. How do you deal with that challenge?
I did stay true to the facts of history. I think that's important. These are real people. Certainly, I had to pick and choose my focus. You know, both of these men were well-spoken and well-written. So, you know, I tried to sprinkle in their own words throughout the book to give a sense of, you know, how they spoke. Martin Luther King, obviously one of the greatest speechwriters and speakers, I think, of all time. And Rabbi Heschel, who is also a wonderful poet besides his many books. So it was a matter of weaving in their words to create a fuller story, and hopefully I did it successfully.
Now, you sent a handwriting sample to Arlen.
That I did.
Arlen, go ahead and tell us about Richard's writing.
He, like Heschel, is searching for answers to questions that don't have answers. He, like Martin Luther King, transcended the conventions he grew up with. He's a man of many appetites, and he's entrepreneurial. He does his own thing in his own way. He's very smart. He's very fast. His writing is very liquid and very fluid and aesthetic. I think art might interest him because he keeps a frame around his letters as if it's a picture frame. He keeps it contained in a particular concentrated space.
Did you know that he's an art gallery owner?
I didn't think of him that way. I thought of him really as the author of the book on Heschel and on Martin Luther King. I found that out afterwards.
Richard, you've heard some analysis from Arlen. What did you think of what she had to say?
Well, I am a born skeptic in just about everything, but I have to admit that Arlen was both perceptive and lovely to speak to. Of course, it's always difficult because she said a number of things that were right on target. And I am reading her book now to try to find out what I missed, and perhaps she opened my mind a little bit.
It's not easy, I think, for a skeptic to be won over, and so I considered that great victory.
Thanks so much for speaking with us.
Well, thank you very much, Heidi.
My pleasure, and you're very welcome.
Rabbi Gershom Suzomo is a member of the Abayudaya, the Jewish community of Uganda. He was recently ordained as a conservative rabbi by the American Jewish University, and he's the first black sub-Saharan rabbi. The music on his CD, Sing for Joy, brings his African community together and helps others learn about the Abayudaya. I originally tried to do an international phone interview with Rabbi Suzomo, but the connection with Uganda was too temperamental for my recording equipment. Luckily, I had the chance to speak to him again when he visited the United States this fall.
Shema, 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 Shema Israel. Shema, 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 Shema Israel.
Rabbi Suzomo, give us some background about the Abayudaya, the Jews of Uganda.
The Abayudaya is a Luganda word that means the people of Judah. And it is a community of native Ugandans who converted to Judaism in 1919. The founder of the community, who was a local leader, read the Bible that was given to him by Christian missionaries and founded Judaism and began to observe Shabbat. He circumcised himself and observed the rules of kashrut and festivals. That's the short background of our community.
So that's interesting. It sounds like it was almost accidental because Christian missionaries were trying to introduce Christianity, but by going back to the source, he decided to go all the way back to Judaism instead of Christianity.
Exactly.
The missionaries must have been really upset, or at least
they
surprised.
They were very upset. They were very upset to the extent that they threatened him with statements like Jews, Christ killers, but he wasn't discouraged.
That's very interesting. Rabbi, you were ordained at American Jewish University in Los Angeles, and when you got back to Uganda, you supervised over 250 conversions to Judaism.
Yes.
Why is there so much eagerness among Ugandans and other Africans to convert to Judaism?
You know, Judaism provides an alternative to many of the religions that have been traditional in Uganda. Also, Judaism is a practical religion, meaning that it's about practice and observances more than just belief. And so most people who are interested are former Seventh-day Adventists who observed Shabbat. Others had sort of joined the Messianic movement in Uganda. which professed some kind of Judaism, but with a mixture of Jesus. And so they were very closer to Judaism.
Now, were you yourself brought up Jewish, or were you also converted to Judaism?
I am fourth generation of the people who converted in 1919.
Great.
Yes.
Now, I wanted to talk about your CD.
Yes.
Your CD, Sing for Joy, features music of the Abayudaya.
Yes.
What makes this music unique?
The music of Abayudaya is a response to youth demands in 1981-82 after the fall of Idi Amin. The youth had been discouraged and they were not very active in the community. And so we decided to use music as a way of attraction, as a means of attraction to the youth. And so the old liturgical music of the Abayudaya was very slow. It was like a chanting Torah. It wasn't as lively as Sing for Joy. So we composed and wrote new tunes for the Psalms of David and other original compositions. And we introduced the guitar and the drum to our music. And it was more lively with an African beat. And this began to attract youth to services.
So the music on the CD is not traditional music among the Abayudaya. It's music that you created for a purpose.
Exactly.
What role does music play in Ugandan Jewish society?
Music is a language that is easy to understand for even kids. People may not even understand the words in Hebrew or the meaning of Torah verses, but music, even when words are not understandable, the beauty of it can draw people to spirituality. So I think music is a very important spiritual tool.
And besides this new style of music that you created, does music have a strong role traditionally in Ugandan society?
Yes. When people die, there's music. Every occasion has its own kind of music. And the South Africans in Uganda express themselves mostly. Weddings, funerals, any happy occasion, music is included.
Now, besides the fact that this is very joyful music on the CD, is there any other significance to the title Sing for Joy?
To be happy is part of life and is a very necessary part of life. So music brings in some Jewish joy.
Do you have a favorite song on the CD or one that has particular meaning for you?
I love the Shema because, it's an important prayer in Jewish liturgy, and we say it every morning and evening, and to be able to sing it is very refreshing for me.
Now, this album is produced in association with an organization called Bechol Lashon, which is Hebrew for in every tongue. Can you tell us more about Bechol Lashon?
Bechol Lashon brings together Jews from different backgrounds, especially Jews from places that are not heard of in terms of Judaism. And so it sort of brings together Jews who are on the periphery, marginalized Jewish groups. In the Bechol Lashon, we have African-American Jews from Harlem, from Chicago, from all over the United States, the Anusim, Jews from Spain, Yemen, Ethiopia, Uganda, Ghana, South Africa. So it sort of focuses on Jewish populations that could be sort of ignored or marginalized.
And how does Bechol Lashon help those Jewish communities?
Bechol Lashon gives them a forum to express their Judaism, their programs for holidays, and gives them also a platform to speak out their problems and to discuss and find solutions and find ways on how to push their Judaism ahead. We want people to find ways of coming to visit, so because we want to be connected to the larger Jewish world.
Mm-hmm. So you want to extend the invitation for Jews around the world to come to Uganda and visit?
And visit, exactly, or write emails or call, whatever. That kind of support, so that we are not alone in Africa.
Is there a special website for the Jews of Uganda where we can interact from other places with your community?
Actually, for now, people can go through Bechol Lashon, but we are working on setting up a website for interaction.
Okay, terrific. Rabbi Sizomu, thanks so much for speaking with us.
Thank you for the interview.
Watch a video about the Abayudaya of Uganda at bookoflifepodcast.com. The Book of Life is a podcast service of Congregation B'nai Israel of Boca Raton, Florida at cbiboca.org and is supported in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries, online at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilachmakers Klezmer String Band at freilachmakers.com. Visit our podcast website at bookoflifepodcast.com or listen to the latest episode by phone at 916-313-3820. We welcome your comments and questions at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening and happy reading.